Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Cadet First Class Daniel Hong. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 32nd Annual National Character and Leadership Symposium's Class of 1959 Leadership Keynote Lecture. Please join me in thanking the Class of 1959 for generously sponsoring this session. I'd now like to introduce our esteemed speaker, Col Allison Black, U.S. Air Force retired. Col Allison Black, known as the Angel of Death, has had a remarkable 32-year career in the United States Air Force, culminating in her final command of the 1st Special Operations Wing at Hurlburt Field, Florida. A native of East Northport, New York, she enlisted in 1992 as a survival, evasion, resistance, escape specialist, and later earned her undergraduate degree from Wayland Baptist University. Commissioned in 1998, she went on to earn her navigator wings, serving in U.S. SOCOM and Air Force Special Operations Command. Less than 90 days after the September 11 attacks, nerves were still raw when First Lieutenant Allison Black arrived in Uzbekistan. Assigned as an AC-130H gunship navigator, her assignment was to plot routes, communicate with ground forces, and identify targets in the darkness below. During her first combat mission near the enemy-held city of Kunduz, Afghanistan, Black and her crew took anti-aircraft fire from the Taliban. With the help of a Northern Alliance general, they identified a nearby safe house hiding over 200 Taliban and al-Qaeda soldiers. As they approached the target, Black's voice over the radio shattered the silence, surprising the Northern Alliance general who remarked, "A woman sent to kill the Taliban." Under heavy enemy fire, Black's crew fired over 400 rounds of 40mm cannon and 100 rounds of 105mm howitzer at the target, killing more than 200 enemy combatants. The Afghan general, impressed by her effectiveness, dubbed her the Angel of Death and told the enemy over their frequency, "America is so determined, they bring their woman to kill the Taliban. It is the Angel of Death raining fire upon you." For her actions, Col Black became one of the first 7 airmen to receive the Air Force Combat Action Medal. She continued to excel in her career, accumulating over 3,400 flight hours, including 2,000 combat hours in the AC-130H Spectre gunship and U-28A Draco. She commanded at all levels, including her final role as commander of the 1st Special Operations Wing, overseeing approximately 4,600 personnel and 80 aircraft across 7 flying squadrons. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming retired Col Allison Black.
Thank you. Hey, good morning. Thank you for the introduction and laying out my bio. I am absolutely humbled to be here. Having been blessed to serve over 32 years with incredible men and women, it's not lost on me that I get to stand here and I have teammates that cannot. I have been able to stand on the shoulders of giants, many that are in this room today. We invest in each other, and for that, we become a more lethal team. When I think about service, I think about the chance to gather, the chance that we get to be here together, to learn, to listen, to share what it takes to be a leader of character, to be a warrior. And what that means to all of you is very similar to what it means to me. Dr. Martin Luther King shared quite a bit, but shared something that I relied on throughout my career, and I felt it was very relevant to share it with you today. He said, "Use me, God. Show me how to take who I am, who I want to be, and what I can do, and use it for a purpose greater than myself." Like I said, I've had the privilege to serve side by side with incredible men and women in our Air Force, in our Joint Force, with our coalition partners, and those teams are lethal. And they're lethal by design. They're lethal because we train hard, we focus on the mission, we have the grit, the determination, and the perseverance. Those are just a few of the ingredients that, in my opinion, make a warrior. I think about my career, I think about phrases that might capture the opportunities that our Air Force has given me. One of those phrases is unintended impact. The other phrase is rooted in my soft background, and it's having the guts to try. So when I came in at 18 years old looking to be a part of something bigger than myself, I found SEER, or SEER found me. I knew nothing about survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. As was briefed, I grew up on Long Island, New York. I knew nothing about returning with honor, but I will tell you the shaping that I went through by NCOs inside that career field and inside our Air Force. They showed me what right looked like. They showed me that words fall flat. Show how good you can be through your actions. Show up and put up. Show that you can continue moving forward, and you will be successful. My career, and I would offer that in life, we have successes and we have failures. We all like to win. When we show up on game day, nobody shows up to the locker room or on the field and says, let's lose today. This is going to be great. We show up to win. But that winning spirit comes from inside, cultivated by the people to your left and right, but through hard work. We learn a lot when we succeed, but I'd offer that we learn a lot more when we fail. You've heard before, when you fail, fail forward. Well, what does that mean? For me, it just meant stumbling, because that's usually what happened. But I would offer that failing forward for me is learning from that lesson. Failure doesn't taste good, doesn't feel good, doesn't look good, but what you do in that moment, what you do with that lesson defines you as a warrior, as a teammate. You take that lesson and you share it. Because if I fail, that's one thing. But if you fail because of the mistake that I failed to share with you, shame on me. So we take those lessons and we learn. And we become a more lethal team. Success, failure, I saw a lot of it throughout my career. But it's defining. Once again, reinforcing the fact that you have to have the courage and the guts to try to lean in. There have been many branches in the road where I doubted my ability. I wasn't strong enough, I wasn't fast enough, I wasn't smart enough, feeling like an imposter. You may have felt that way too. I would tell you that it's from within, when you take that next step forward, you may find success on the other side. Sometimes it takes that person to your left and right with that nudge, that pushing you forward just a little further to build that confidence. Believing in somebody else when they may not believe in themselves. That is, I think, a foundational piece of what makes a lethal team. So throughout my career in SEER, which is about 6.5 years, I was faced with another opportunity to commission in the United States Air Force. And while I'm not an Air Force Academy graduate, I have ties to the Air Force Academy. Because in 1994, and I recognize a lot of the room might not have been alive in 1994, I was an Airman First Class teaching the SEER program here for our future leaders. So I understand the relevance and the importance of building that spirit. And I'm humbled to have had the opportunity to commission and then to come back here today to share just a little bit of my story. Every single one of you have a story, and any one of you could be up on this stage sharing those lessons. You have a stage every single day. You make an impact every single day. What do you want that impact to be? If people go home, call home, sit around the dinner table and are talking about you, what do you want that conversation to be? You own that. You own that through your reputation and your credibility. And I think that when we talk about the warrior spirit and building elite teams, we deal in trust. In life, we deal in trust. When you trust somebody, you will give them more responsibility. When you trust somebody, you will go to them with your toughest problems. How do you gain trust? Through reps and sets, through character, through showing up, through rolling up your sleeves and never asking somebody to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. That goes back to action speaking louder than words. Show up, put up, and learn. Don't be afraid to not know the answer. Ask. It's humbling sometimes when you don't know. It's hard sometimes to raise your hand to ask the question, but that's how you fill your own cup to be more lethal. And then your team, that team, becomes the winning team, which is what we need. So we think about character, we think about trust, that reputation that you guard. You know, you represent a lot of things, and you've likely heard this before. You're wearing it. You represent your family by your name on your uniform. You represent your squadron. You represent the year you're graduating, perhaps. You represent your unit, your background. On that shoulder, you represent the United States of America. You get to. Something I fell back on as well throughout my career is the word get and the word have. So there are a lot of things that we have to do in the military. You have to walk a certain way, you have to wear your uniform a certain way, you have to follow certain policies and procedures, you have to deploy. And in fact, I was talking to a room full of men and women who were getting ready to deploy at Hurlburt Field, and we were talking about them getting ready to hop on the bus and get on the airplane. And I asked them, I said, you know, do you have to deploy? And they hesitated. It wasn't a loaded question. It was, yes, you have to deploy. We've got you locked in a room, you're getting on an airplane, there's no way about it, right? But if you take the word have, because some of them were scared, it was their first deployment. Maybe they were leaving their family behind, maybe a very young child. Maybe they were going to a very hostile area, right? So if you take the word have and you toss it aside and you put in the word get, you get to wear that uniform. You get to wear that flag on your sleeve and represent the freedoms that we hold so dear. While our country might not be perfect, there is no place we would rather be. And by feeling like you get to do these things, you get to go somewhere in the world and show them how great our nation is. In the story of the angel of death, I got to be a part of a crew that was able to deliver effects. That story about the angel of death really, for me, was unintended impact. I mentioned before that my career has been riddled with unintended impacts and having the guts to try. You know, I had the guts to try to become an officer, to go through aviation training, to go to AFSOC, to be at the tip of the spear, to go to combat. And I find myself on my first combat mission ever over in the skies of Afghanistan supporting our ground forces. ODA 595, a 12-man special Green Beret team with a couple of Air Force combat controllers. And our job from the AC-130 was to protect our friendly forces, find the enemy and eliminate them if necessary, but it was to protect our team. And by virtue of me, a woman on a crew, that caused a little poking of the bear, a little disgrace to the enemy. And I'll tell you, the feeling of our nation in 2001 was payback. Nobody shows up to the fight wanting to kill somebody, but we recognize that we are in the armed forces. We recognize that war is our business. And we were trained hard, and we were trained well, and prepared when the nation needed us to respond. So when General Dostum heard my voice and it became this angel of death, I will tell you that we didn't talk about that in the unit. I didn't like that story. And I didn't like that story because I was being called out for being different. But I've recognized over the years that that is a story of unintended impact. The fact that I get to be up here and share a piece of my story, I am a reflection of everybody that has poured into me over the years. And I have embraced the opportunity to represent them through my story. General Dostum, as much as he poked at the enemy that night, he took that story in 2001 to a burqa unveiling ceremony. And he talked to Afghan men, women, and children and said, hey, America allows their women to fly on these warplanes. If you continue to fight, you will have those freedoms one day. I met General Dostum's son in 2011 at Ground Zero. I've met Afghan men, women, and children, and they've heard those stories, the stories of impact. Again, I am just a representation of an elite team that was ready to answer the call. By me sharing pieces of my story, successes, but mostly failures, I have been able to have an impact on others that I could not foresee. whether it was in an airplane, whether it was on the ground, whether it was just taking care of people. We are in the people business. I was listening to General Barafine just this morning as he was speaking to you all, and this is a people business. In special operations, we have soft truths, right? Number one soft truth is that humans are more important than hardware. That humans are more important than hardware transcends any command. Soft just coined it. We'll keep it. But we need to invest in our people. We need to invest in our capabilities, in our strength. As I had the opportunity to hang around with some of our cadets the last couple of days, I asked them, like, what is warrior ethos? What does a warrior mean to you? Their answer? It comes in many forms. It appears in different ways, in different circumstances. When you think of warrior, it isn't just this Spartan warrior. In some cases, that's exactly what we need our men and women to do, but in other cases, it's the soft touch of understanding. It's the courage to take the next step forward. It's the courage to not know what's on the other side of that door, not know when you're coming back. And that doesn't happen alone. That happens because of the community that's here with us today, the people that buy into us, the giants whose shoulders we stand on. Anybody who loses blood, sweat, or tears deserves to feel valued for their contribution to the team. So how do we make sure that our people feel a part of the team? In some cases, it's very visible. It's a tangible feedback because we just blew something up, right? We just secured the enemy. We just rescued the hostages. We just knocked down the target. In other cases, it's not so visible. So it's so important for this institution, for our future leaders, and not just the cadets going through the course, but our active duty that support, our civilians that support, our community members that support, to show the tie to the mission. So whether it's logistics, whether it's maintenance, whether it's finance, whether it's intelligence, whether it's acquisitions, contracting, what is that tied to the mission? Because those aircraft would not be overhead if it wasn't for the maintainer that took care of that aircraft. Those people wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the people that fueled, the people that packaged the cargo. On the medical side, the mentally, spiritually, physically fit to fight, to bring it to the enemy. So as you go out back into the force and you share stories of our mission, you have to create the tie. I believe that you would all agree that if you understand the why behind what you're doing, you're going to have buy-in. If you are a leader of character, if you do what you say and you back up your word and you show up, people will follow. If you own your mistakes and failures and use it for good, people will follow. Our machines will automate, our challenges will change, but our people are what make the difference. And I know that's definitely a pattern of what you guys have heard. I'm going to read another quote to you. And this is Ralph Waldo Emerson. Do not go where the trail may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. When you pave the way, when problems arise, sometimes there is no answer. There is no specific way to go down that path. You have to create it. I would offer to you that on September 10th, 2001, we did not understand what the next 2 decades was going to look like. We didn't understand how to fight specifically in Afghanistan, from the air, from the ground, what that would be. But our people were problem solvers. Our people came together and we adapted and we were successful. And right now as we pivot to global power competition, we pivot to regions of the world that really are global, but problems that we haven't really wrapped our arms around and we're working hard to do so. It's you all that will solve it. Whether that problem comes from space, from air, from surface, from subsurface, you all will come together and solve it. I would venture to guess that every single person in this room has been given a problem they had no idea how to solve. And you grab it and you're like, I don't know what to do with my hands. And you turn, and it's yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and you move out. And you turn around and you're like, oh gosh, how am I gonna figure this out? And you figured it out by looking to your left and your right at your teammates. And you came together with solutions. Because leaders are really problem solvers. You present options for commanders. And if you think of yourself as if leaders, being the officer in charge, is intimidating in any way, shape, or form, and for some it can be, depending on the circumstances, we're human, right? If you think of yourself as a problem solver, it takes the pressure off, because that's exactly what you are. Coming up with options and then learning. You do the right things for the right reasons with the information that you have, you cannot go wrong. You will find success. And then you will find failure. Once again, back to what I said earlier, when you find that failure, it's what you do in that moment. No, courage, we've likely heard this before, courage is not being afraid. It's what you do in the face of fear. It's having that courage to push through. And when you fail, you can quit or you can double down and have that courage to push through. I would say that when I was faced with those challenges or thoughts that I was not good enough, smart enough, talented enough to take on that challenge, I leaned in. I took the next step. And I found, more often than not, that people believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Believe in each other. Make yourself stronger, and you will find that we will win. There's a couple other things I'd like to share with you. Let me just make sure I hit it real quick. We talk about community. We talk about power. I can't get off the stage without saying how grateful I am for what this community does and for those that continue to serve. When we go down range, and I had the privilege to lead men and women in combat around the world, and we know that our families back home are taken care of, that takes that pressure off. That allows that young man or woman to focus on the mission in a way that they wouldn't otherwise. Because when things aren't settled at home, it's a distraction. And we can't afford that distraction. So I thank you in advance for what you will do, but also what you have done. There's a challenge that I'll offer to you while we're here. As leaders, our primary role is to grow the next, right? To grow the next generation. And there has to be something every day that you use to grow the next. So choose something today that you've learned from someone and share it with somebody who's not here. If we were to do that every single day, we share just one lesson, we would expand our reach and strengthen our team, and we would be that much more lethal for any problem that comes our way. It has been my privilege to serve for over 32 years. It is my humble honor to be here just to share a little bit of my story. The Air Force has allowed me to be a part of incredible organizations. I absolutely got to. I will share a short story, and then I'm going to get the heck out. I think I'm going to pivot for some questions. But one of our senior enlisted leaders, our chief, was sitting on an airplane. And he got on, had his hat on, had his AirPods in. It's a civilian airliner. Nobody was in the seat next to him. And this lady gets on the airplane and she sits down next to the chief, and he doesn't want to talk to anybody. Like a lot of us when we travel, we just want to kind of get into our book or listen to our music. But she was looking at him. And he was like, oh man, and he takes out his AirPod and he begins this conversation reluctantly. And they get into a chat about his career, his 25-year career, and what he had done and where he had been and the countries and the people he had impacted and how that had impacted him. And at the end of that flight, this lady looked at him and said, are you lying? And the chief was like, no, ma'am, no, I'm not lying to you. She's like, that can't be true. All of these things and all of these countries and all of these people. Oh, yes, ma'am, it's true. I got to, is what he said to her. We all have been afforded an opportunity in our Air Force, in our United States of America, to make impact on people. You may never know the impact you make on somebody, but you may find out. You may have that person that circles back and says, hey, you believing in me in that moment made a difference. Be that person. Be that leader that you want to be led by. Be the leader that our people deserve to be led by. I can't stop my talk without asking you all today and really every day to always take a moment of time and think about the men and women that are around the world at this very moment, protecting the freedoms that we hold so dear. May God bless all of you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Black. At this time, I would like to open the floor for questions. Attendees can ask questions at the microphones positioned in the audience.
Oh, man. I've solved all the world's problems.
Hello? Is this on? Oh, it is, I think.
It is.
So, ma'am, I'm Cadet Hunter Smith from CS-33. My question is, how would you say your prior enlisted experience within the Air Force served you as you went forward in your commissioned career?
Yeah, great question. So if you didn't hear, how did my prior enlisted experience set me up for success as an officer? I feel like I did 6.5 years before applying for officer training, and I understood our Air Force. So I understood some processes, which I think if I had come in off the streets, not through a ROTC program or through an academy, that I might not have known otherwise. I also recognized the power of an NCO. So in SEER, in my early ages, I didn't know anything different than to feel empowered, right? They trained us well, and then they gave us the responsibility of taking men and women, high-risk personnel and aviators, out to the middle of nowhere and believing that we were going to bring them back alive. But then also giving them the skills, right, to return with honor in their future jobs. So I saw that, and I just took that with me, knowing no different. And I also believe that showing up at Special Ops, at the 16th Special Operations Squadron at Hurlburt Field, they'd all been through SEER, so they might have been like slightly intimidated, as much as I would flex and show my power. Or I might have actually interrogated them when they went through the program. I think the sense was that they respect our NCOs. Our officers respect what you do. And in that career field specifically, it gave me a little bit of credibility, but it allowed me to communicate, to use my NCOs as teammates, learn from them. As officers sometimes come and go, they become the core foundation of a unit, and I found that to be true. So it absolutely prepared me. It was and is foundational, that experience, to who I am today.
Wonderful. Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning, Colonel Black. I'm Cadet Van Sickle from Marquette University. I wanted to ask, why did you choose SEER, and what made you choose the commissioning route after you were enlisted?
Okay, great question. Why did I choose SEER? I don't know that answer. So when I joined the Air Force, I didn't come from a military family. I didn't know much about it. When I was day 6 or 7 of Air Force basic training in a room full of other basic trainees, and it's like a bar joke. A pararescueman walked in, a combat controller walked in, then it was a survival instructor, a SEER specialist walked in. They talked about these elite career fields, and that was a challenge. I'll tell you, I was terrified I was not gonna make it. I was going to fail and I would end up kicked out of the military. And I asked that question, I said, what if I can't do this job? What do you do with me? Because I don't know anything about it. He said, no, we've got good training. You're stuck in the Air Force, you're not going anywhere. It was the challenge. And I will tell you that I failed time and time again. And it was that NCO that picked me up by the scruff of the neck, and I did a little retraining, and I worked a little bit harder. And maybe I had to work a little bit harder than some others, but I wasn't gonna say 2 words. I quit. You can tell me I fail, but I will never say those words. So that is why I chose SEER and chose to challenge myself and found that it was a place I never knew I wanted to be. And in commissioning, that was also not expected. I elected to put my package in as an officer out of a fear of regret. I fear regret. I don't want to be old and gray and wish I had tried something. I never expected to get accepted for officer training. I had an undergraduate in corporate training and development. I knew nothing about airplanes other than there were fast ones, there were slow ones, there were super fast ones. I knew how to train the folks to survive on the ground. But it was a challenge. And I submitted my package fully expecting them to tell me no, and then I would move on and reset my expectations somewhere else. The Air Force, in their infinite wisdom, did not say no. They took me, and I ended up in Joint Undergraduate Navigator training. And I knew then, once I got accepted, that I was going to do everything I could to get to AFSOC because of the mission.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks. Thanks for the question.
Hello, ma'am. I'm Molly Schuler from the Frances Hesselbein program with MSEC. And my question for you is, if there is one thing the young generation should keep to their hearts for the future, what is it?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that part.
If there is one thing that the young generation should keep to their hearts for the future, what is it?
Should keep to their hearts for the future? Have faith in your country and your family. I believe in yourself. You should be your biggest believer.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am. Cadet 3rd Class Col Allison from Cadet Squadron 01. I just had a question about transitioning from direct supervising into commanding. What was the biggest challenge that you noticed going into that?
I think when you are given with job titles comes great responsibility, commanding great responsibility. I think there were some lessons along the way for me that as a youngster, whether I was enlisted or as an officer, especially as an officer, I was really responsible for myself. I needed to be really good at my job, right? Because if we're really good at our job, then people want you on the team. They don't care what you look like, right? You're good, let's go. That is what we breed in our military. Despite any of the noise, we need people to be experts, and then we will put a team together and execute. And when I transitioned to being in charge of others, the weight of responsibility, that it wasn't just about me, that it was about the other men and women and making sure that they got to come home to their families, is a weight unlike any other. To look at the families that we're leaving behind in the eyes. My family was one thing, but to look at others and know that was my responsibility, took that very seriously. And that manifested itself in deliberate training and hard training to make sure that we were prepared to up all of our chances to make sure that we all could come home. It doesn't come without its trials and errors and highs and lows. And I found that in command, you're not alone. You may feel alone, but you're not alone. Right? Everybody wants to see you succeed, so you should have built a mentor. You should have mentors along the way. There's always the phone a friend if you've got a problem, and you usually, as an officer, have that senior enlisted leader, that teammate to your right or your left, to bounce ideas off of and come together to understand what the organization needs. So there's power in numbers. Use your team. You're not alone.
Thank you, ma'am.
You bet.
Hello, my name is Mason Roush. I'm from the Francis Hesselbein Leadership Program, and you said you never know the impact that you can leave on someone, and I was wondering who left the biggest impact on you, and how did that make you like a better person and a better leader?
Great question. So who left the biggest impact on me? So, of course, I need to give all glory to God and my faith, because I believe He has given me skills and abilities and put me in positions that I wouldn't have been otherwise. And if I think about somebody who's here in the present, it would be my husband, Ryan. So I've been married. It'll be 30 years this year. Thank you. I am grateful. I'm grateful to be alive. I am grateful to have my family intact. I am grateful that we still like each other, because not everybody gets that. He was a SEER specialist in his own right, and he was a leader I admired. I would have followed him. I'll still follow. Don't tell him this. I would follow him anywhere. He's usually right. He showed me what right looks like. He has been the ability to come home and have a senior enlisted leader in your home throughout your career to bounce ideas off of and work through challenges and just keep me grounded. I benefited from a mill-to-mill family and career, so I could go get into the fight, or he could go get into the fight, and we really guarded each other from any of the chaos at home, and that doesn't always happen. So he is absolutely my hero, my in-house leader, my best friend, and somebody who inspires me on the daily. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you for the answer.
Good morning, Colonel Black.
Good morning.
I'm C3C Rosabelle Mimer from Cadet Squadron 9. I really love reading books, and I was wondering, is there any book that you've read before that you would recommend to other people to read that helped you develop you into who you are now?
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you. One that instantly comes to mind, and I've used it throughout my career to help grow our command teams, is Turn Your Ship Around by David Marquet. And this book is about leading with intent. The word I intend. So if you haven't read it or you like to listen to books, like absolutely give it a shot. It's an easy read, not a lot of big words, so I found it pretty easy to do. General Davidson, I know it would help you, is a lot of short words. So that being said, the premise of this book is that this submarine captain is about ready to take command of a submarine. And he has studied this submarine, soup to nut, like tip to stern, front to back. Like he knows the sub, he knows the systems, he's studied the people, their records. This submarine has the best retention rates, has scored high marks on all their inspections, and a couple of weeks prior to command, he gets shifted. His boss calls him and says, hey, you're not going there. You're going to this other submarine, the Santa Fe. And that submarine is like a soup sandwich. Low retention rates, there's a lot of mistakes happening, inspections aren't that great, and he doesn't have time to study the ship and the weapon system. So I feel like that resonated with me throughout my career, because we end up in these jobs, in these offices and commands and locations that we don't have a chance to know the people or the mission or the problem. But we embrace it and we use the people that are there. He used the people in the sub to learn about the systems. He empowered them. I think what resonated with me in this story is that leading with intent. As a young airman, 19 years old, I was taught to lean in and lead and empower others. I found that delegation can be hard. It was hard for me to ask somebody to do something because I just felt bad about asking people to do things. Sometimes they were my peers, and that's somewhat of a challenge that you guys here at the Academy, right? But delegation is the opportunity for other people to deliver. And And with the leading with intent, a premise why it resonated with me as well. And it was something that I actually did probably on the last email I sent before I hung up my cleats on active duty and command to my boss. Anytime there's a problem, the challenge is this. If you have a problem and you know about it, you've studied it, you probably have a pretty good idea of a way you want to solve it or it should be solved. But you might need permission or authority to do it. And I would offer to you that in all of that homework, when you show up to that approval authority, right, you show up and go, here is this problem. I intend to fix it this way. And that authority figure you give the strategic pause, and they will likely say, all right. That was the premise of what Captain Marquet found, is he was able to create a leader-leader model versus a leader-follower. So people were wrapping their arms around the problem and then coming up, presenting the solutions and intending to fix it. Instead of going, I've got this problem. Hey, boss, I got this problem. They're going to look at you in the eyes and be like, okay. Now they'll have to work through it with you. And likely, they have other problems that they're working on solving. So turn your ship around, lead with intent, leader-leader model versus a leader-follower. It turns passive followers into active leaders. Big fan of that.
Thank you, ma'am.
You bet. I riffed it on that for a little bit.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Amira Bernard with the Frances Hasselbein Student Leadership Program.
Good morning.
And the question that I'd like to ask is, what advice would you give to young women planning on joining the military service?
I would give this advice to young men or young women. I will go back to what we cultivate, and I think our military, especially in SOF, like if there's something you want to do it. You know, there are standards. Don't just meet the standard, exceed it. Don't let anybody question your ability to meet the requirement. So make sure you train above it, whether it's academically or physical, academic requirement or physical requirement, right? Exceed it. Leave no question. Chase your dreams, because everything is on the table. I would offer to folks that maybe don't see somebody that looks like them in that role. I didn't have somebody that looked like me inside SOF when I got there. But I was naive not even to look. I was naive enough, I wasn't even looking. They pointed it out to me, like, no, we haven't had women in our navigator before in our squadron. I'm like, oh, really? Okay. We didn't have very many in SEER, but it was the mission that I wanted to be at. And I will tell you this, regardless of what color your skin is, what your gender is, we want good teammates. We want people who want to mentally be there, who can who can physically do the job. We want people who are bought in. And we need you on the team. So go for it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have time for one more question.
Actually, I believe you were here first.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning,
Good
Colonel
morning.
Black. I am Oliver Harmon from the Warren Tech Criminal Justice Program, and I was asking, how do you lead through failure?
Ooh. Leading through failure. When you make a mistake and you stumble, I'll give an example of sharing a lesson in stumbling. Kind of a funny example. Downrange, on a treadmill, running in the gym, and I'm watching something on my iPad, and my hard drive dies, so I choose something that's actually loaded on the iPad itself. And it happens to be a horror movie. So I'm running and watching this because I just wanted to watch something, and something really scary happened, and I stumbled and I fell. I grabbed onto the side rails, and what's the first thing you think I did? I looked around. Right? Because I just failed in public, right? I made a fool of myself. And I think when we fail at something, it stings. So my recommendation, my thoughts on it, is you're going to have a pity party, right? Maybe it's a couple of seconds, right? You brush it off, you look around, hey, that gym, it was early, there was not many people in the gym, there was one guy behind me. But then I used that failure as a lesson, right? So now my pro tip is, for all of you, don't watch a horror movie on the treadmill. use those lessons. Sometimes you'll share that failure with a large group. Sometimes it'll be one-on-one. Sometimes that lesson might not come up for years, but use it for good. As embarrassing as it might be, use it for good. That builds the lethality of our team, and that is what makes us so effective. That is what commands respect from our joint teammates in the uniform, from our allies and partners. They know that they can trust us, that when we do make a mistake, we will share it, we will own it, and don't blow smoke. If you fail at something or you make a mistake, you own that failure.
Thank you, ma'am.
You bet. Thank you.
Colonel Black, on behalf of the U.S. Air Force Academy and our National Character and Leadership Symposium, thank you for sharing your experiences and enriching our understanding of warfighters to win.
Thank you.